Steve Austin is one of the most critically ill astronauts in the world. We can restore him, sirs. He was a six-millionaire, a legend, an unstoppable force, and everyone looked up to him. Known for her contagious smile, she became the most famous woman on television. The perfect Hollywood power couple, they seemed. The truth was far from the idyllic magazine covers. Their story spiraled downward into betrayal, sadness, and decades of quiet behind locked doors. Lee Majors never forgave her. Once you find out what really happened, you'll understand why. Lee Majors and Farrah Fawcett were simply two young, idealistic actors trying to make it big in a brutal and beautiful industry before their names became ingrained in American popular culture. Lee had already begun to forge his own path. Harvey Lee Urey was born in Michigan but spent his childhood in Kentucky. His unassuming confidence and rugged good looks won over the casting directors. He had his big break starring opposite Barbara Stanwyck in The Big Valley, and he quickly became a respected actor with an undeniable charisma on screen. The Southern beauty queen Farrah lived in Texas, on the other hand. She moved to Los Angeles to seek a career in modeling when her photogenic smile and effortless charisma caught the eye of photographers, agencies, and producers. Her striking good looks garnered attention long before her name did. Her sun-kissed hair, sparkling eyes, and effortless charm made her one of a kind. Their mutual friends introduced them during a party in the 60s. According to some who were there, the chemistry was instantaneous. On television, Lee had already achieved fame. Farrah had just started. But there was a deeper connection to the couple than first impressions. Faithful, humble, and controlled, Lee never wavered. Lively, funny, and full of life, that was Farrah. He took her down a notch. Her presence moved him. They were perfect for each other. Their marriage took place in 1973. For some time it seemed like a Hollywood fantasy as well. Lee had just landed his dream role as Colonel Steve Austin in the blockbuster film The $6 Million Man. Lee became a household figure thanks to the show's huge success, which attracted millions of viewers weekly. All around the United States, you might see his likeness on lunchboxes, posters, and action figures. Farrah, on the other hand, had a successful modeling career. Her acting career began with guest appearances in magazines and shampoo commercials. Her big break was almost here, so Lee was thrilled to watch her succeed. In interviews given during that period, he spoke highly of her beauty and talent, talking about her as the one he loves the most. According to those on the outside, they were golden. Feature articles, red carpet events, and celebrity gatherings. The two of them seemed perfect for each other. Though most people couldn't see the fissures appearing just beneath the surface, they were growing rapidly. Their schedules rarely lined up. A lot of extra hours were being put in by Lee on his TV. As Farrah was starting her own career, she was also attending auditions and making connections. The fame for which they had worked so diligently was slowly tearing them apart. But Lee tried to cling on. She and their marriage were something he believed in. Not always in a bad way, but sometimes to the point where the one who knew them best can't recognize them anymore. Celebrity changes people. Even though Farrah's star was set to skyrocket, their picture-perfect marriage was about to face obstacles that nobody could have predicted. Fame did not come easily to Farrah Fawcett. She became famous to a degree that very few individuals ever do. Joining the cast of Charlie's Angels in 1976 was the turning point in her life. Even though the show became an instant hit around the world, Farrah managed to transcend her role as a conventional TV actor. She embodied the glamour, independence, and unfettered beauty of her era. This poster inspired 1,000 crushes among teenagers. Farrah, clad in a crimson bikini, while wearing a grin and a windswept hairstyle, sold over 12 million copies. It became one of the most iconic pictures of the 20th century. Suddenly, she seemed to be everywhere. Product placement, billboards, magazine covers, and conversation shows. Not only was Farrah popular, she was impossible to miss. Despite the millions of people who admired her, her meteoric rise to fame further strains the already troubled marriage. Everyone was trying to get Farrah's attention at once now. A plethora of stylists, publicists, producers, and businesses are competing for her endorsements and time. Lee Majors, her husband, often found himself observing from the sidelines as she savored her time off. After becoming famous thanks to the $6 million person, Lee was used to working long hours and making sacrifices as a television star. The anarchy that Farrah's fame ushered into their home, nevertheless, caught even him off guard. The woman he had married was changing into someone else. She was sturdy, sweet, and firmly rooted in Texas. Not softer or kinder, just distant and preoccupied with the fame machine. Multiple credible sources have said that Lee asked her show's producers to reschedule her tapings so that she and her boyfriend could have dinner together more frequently. The husband's desire to spend more quality time with his wife was crystal clear. So long as her husband didn't get the impression that she was dependent on him, Farrah supposedly declined. Though admirable, her fierce independence caused them to become emotionally distant from each other. Lee later admitted in an interview that, when Farrah was performing at her best, he would only see her twice a week. On top of that, they weren't necessarily spending those moments together, rather, they were brief glimpses into an intimate relationship crammed into the schedule between photo shoots and promotional events. The distance continued to widen despite our best efforts at maintaining a connection through love and patience. Even more agonizing than the actual acknowledgement was the celebrity's significance. More than simply public acclaim contributed to Farrah's rise to fame. A shift in focus, ideals, and relationship status was signaled by it. There she was, the woman who had relied on him for solace, now carrying an empire all by herself. At some point, they also stopped expressing themselves emotionally in the same way. Conventional wisdom has always had Lee's backing. As a child, he thought marriage was a sacred, eternal bond. While Farrah was publicly reimagining who she was, there was no room to slack off. No damage would have come to him from her. But there are times when good things come with bad repercussions, and their relationship took a hit initially. It was all happening in front of an international audience, and when they thought things couldn't get much worse, something happened that would ruin everything. Lee Majors and Farrah Fawcett's emotional gulf became palpable in the late 1970s. The passion that had once bound them had been buried by long stretches of separation, professional obligations, and fame. In reality, they were living their lives as two stars in separate universes, despite the fact that they were still legally married. Brand deals, TV shoots, and appearances filled Farrah's calendar to the brim. Lee carried the weight of his job while he kept filming the $6 million man, even though his personal life was fading away. Allegedly, he tried everything to salvage what he could, including reaching out to others, setting up meetings, and even recruiting people to help them reconnect. Even though Farrah didn't realize it yet, she had begun to move on. The deciding blow was administered by another guy, and not any old man. Ryan O'Neal was someone Lee knew. He was once someone you could rely on, in addition to being an actor and peer. Even though they were both famous in their respective fields, their paths had crossed often. Consequently, the tabloid pictures of Ryan and Farrah smiling, holding hands, and attending events caused Lee to feel direct and personal sorrow. The media took notice of Farrah and Ryan's affair since it was not subtle. She and Lee were still married when their romance became public knowledge. Then it was finished. Magazine spreads, late-night TV jokes, and endless speculation. From the outside looking in, it seemed like a juicy Hollywood controversy. However, it was a totally different issue to Lee, a betrayal that was more terrible than anything he had ever encountered. Lee's buddies say he was taken by surprise. No call reached him. There was no warning issued to him. Through dazzling photos and dramatic headlines, he and the rest of America learned. He had also welcomed the man she was seeing into his life. That, more than anything else, is what made it so terrible. Although the exact chronology is unknown, some publications have even conjectured that Farrah and Ryan's connection might have started while they were still striving to heal their marriage. It's clear that Lee felt humiliated in his role as a husband and as a guy who had built a life with his wife, only to have her seem to be altering their past with someone else. Farrah, on the other hand, never denied the link. She and Ryan quickly became the center of attention whenever anyone went anywhere. And the media wasted no time painting them as the next big thing in Hollywood. Nevertheless, an air of unease persisted, an underlying awareness that a sacred trust had been betrayed. Lee kept silent about it. Nobody ever got their name mentioned by him. No hit came his way. His silence, though, was unbearable. Withdrew his hand. He stopped going to social gatherings with her. He stopped bringing up private matters in interviews. At some point, he stopped talking about Farrah entirely. It seemed like he had moved on, even though his closest friends and family knew differently. His wife was just the beginning. He also lost his solitude, his confidence, and his belief in the meaning of their marriage. Plus, Ryan O'Neal's reputation had been tarnished by the end of his marriage, so forgiving him was out of the question. But Lee Majors did something unexpected instead of dealing with the chaos. He disappeared from her world completely. Once the initial shock had worn off, Lee Majors did something incredibly un-Hollywood. He remained silent. At a point when everyone appeared to have finally spoken up, he still wouldn't budge. There was complete silence, not a single interview, revelation from a memoir, or sneaky press jab. Nearly 9 years after their wedding, in 1982, Lee had already emotionally detached himself by the time their divorce was formalized. He devoted himself fully to his profession, taking up roles in films and TV shows to keep himself busy. He was never able to recapture the excitement of his $6 million man days to their fullest potential. The Fall Guy, a series that ran for several seasons, helped keep his star power up. But his acquaintances say he was never the same behind closed doors. But Farrah loved being the center of attention. She and Ryan O'Neal stayed together through all of their ups and downs. Everything from their fights to their reconciliations to their breakups and even their laughs was chronicled by the tabloids. It appeared as though her entire emotional life had been made public, in sharp contrast to the man she had left behind. What was most surprising was that Lee had no part in her account whatsoever. When Charlie's Angels got back together, he wasn't there. Even when she was out in public, no one ever saw him standing near her. There was no animosity that drove the avoidance. It seemed more like a man trying to keep his anger at bay. In interviews, Farrah's name was rarely brought up, but when it was, Lee would usually just politely react and go on. His lack of interest in Charlie's Angels upon its release was casually brought up at one point. Why? It was very painful, he said. It was too much for him to bear to watch her on video, so enormous, after knowing how much had been lost. The most damning evidence, perhaps, was that Lee did nothing to rectify the record. He refrained from blaming Farrah, criticizing Ryan, or playing the victim. He chose to entirely disappear from the story instead. He seems to have decided that vanishing from her public life was the best way to keep control when she departed. According to others who knew him, the wound remained open when they were alone. It appeared that no one he dated could ever match Farrah, though he did date. Focusing on his work and keeping his personal life under wraps, he stayed single for nearly 20 years. A lot of people said he was nice but distant, while using an unprecedented degree of prudence. At the same time, Farrah was still Farrah, beloved, courageous, and often in the spotlight, though not necessarily for positive reasons. Both her career and her relationship with Ryan were not without their bumps. But she kept on being a famous person who flaunted her injuries to the world. Their differences were glaring. She let the world in on the shambles of her life nevertheless. He discarded the key and closed the door. Years later, something unexpected happened, even though it seemed like their stories would never be repeated again. There was a chance for them to have an intimate, private, and off-the-record encounter that could have changed their relationship forever. But what Lee did after that just served to confirm the long-standing suspicions. Some heartbreaks never fully heal, and sometimes silence is more powerful than words. Time passed. Farrah Fawcett and Lee Majors both rose through the ranks of the entertainment industry as it developed. But behind the scenes, something surprising almost happened, a secret reunion that could have altered the outcome. Farrah entered a more relaxed phase of her life in the early 2000s. Her relationship with Ryan O'Neal had soured, and she was focusing more on her art, humanitarian initiatives, and side acting gigs. Lee had likewise subdued with the passage of time. Instead of being the violent action hero of the 70s, he had become a respected actor with decades of experience. Allegedly, at that moment, a common acquaintance had separate conversations with each of them regarding the possibility of reconnecting. According to those in the know, the suggestion was simple. Not a huge spectacle or a reunion for the cameras, but an intimate get-together where they can finally break their silence after years of not speaking. At first glance, it seemed like the idea had the support of both parties. It was thought that Farrah had been more open to the idea of meeting Lee again. She had once loved him deeply, albeit time had diluted many of her sentiments. Conversely, Lee lacked certainty. He was totally engrossed. It was on his mind. He went so far as to admit, behind closed doors, that he longed for her former self. On the other hand, he declined. He seemed unfazed. He had no animosity. He was just not interested in going back. It had been excessive. The time had passed. In addition, certain wounds, especially the ones that remain unspoken, never completely mend. For years, he had kept silent out of a desire for both solitude and respect. If he saw her again, even for a short time, it would be like revisiting a chapter in his life that he had worked so hard to close. Shortly thereafter, Farrah was diagnosed with cancer. Her rapid decline eliminated any possibility of a reunion. Lee absconded. In public, he avoided all human interaction at all costs. Some thought it was cold, while others said it was the most muted way to communicate grief. The kind that can never seem to find the right words. The truth is that Lee Majors had previously said goodbye. Before anyone even suspected that Farrah was sick, he had already discharged her. The truth is, though, that door had never been shut. What happened afterwards only served to deepen that pain. The news that Farrah Fawcett had a rare and aggressive cancer shocked the world in 2006. She faced her challenge head-on, so she decided to document it in a raw, intimate video diary that would become a documentary. That was her final public act of showing her true self, free from the protection of fame and the spotlight. There were millions of viewers. Her courage in the face of insurmountable odds brought many to tears, and her ability to keep going inspired many more. Nevertheless, there was one individual who remained eerily quiet throughout. Lee Major. As her legacy was revisited and praises began to pour in, Lee chose to stay mute. He said nothing. He skipped the meeting. He skipped both her public and private fundraisers. He was genuinely concerned about it. From the beginning, Farrah's position had a great impact on Lee, according to several who knew him well. According to his acquaintances, he preferred to grieve in private while secretly tracking her vitals. Now that anger had faded, just melancholy lingered. The reality that their chapter had ended a long time ago was something Lee had accepted, even as a comforting gesture. The thought of doing that made him sick to his stomach. Whether it was out of shame, terror, or a desire to avoid harm, no one can say for sure. Still, he steered clear of it. Lee released a solitary, thoughtful statement after Farrah's passing in June 2009. For a long time, she fought a terrible disease. Even when she leaves this world, she will continue to be revered as a celestial being. Although brief, polite, and respectful, it failed to rekindle the passion that had once defined their romance. She was laid to rest without his presence. Others say he couldn't cope. There are those who believe he grieved for her long before she died. Maybe the center ground is where we may find the truth. Lee Majors' decision to stand by Farrah from a distance is striking, considering he would have done anything for her before. Even at that distance, his silence screamed volumes, and many believe he harbored unspoken regret until his dying breath. The passage of time alters narratives. These days, many look back on Lee Majors and Farrah Fawcett with wistful nostalgia, remembering them as a beautiful couple from a bygone era basking in the glow of their heyday. Photographs of them smiling in retro filters at red carpet events continue to circulate online as if nothing ever happened. The truth, however, was considerably more complex, as is known to many who followed in their footsteps. Lee Majors eventually got over it. He wed again in 2002. This time, to a Hollywood outsider woman. During this period of relative calm and stability, he supposedly discovered peace. Still, Farrah's shadow lingered even when she began afresh. He had never loved anyone before, and she had been his worst nightmare come true. Farrah also made a lasting impression. Critics later lauded her for her tragic roles, and she fought for recognition as a serious actress despite the upheaval in her personal life. In her final years, she embraced her illness with grace and honesty, becoming a symbol of courage in the process. But the story between them was still unfinished. There was no farewell meeting, no public atonement, and no tranquility between the two people who had once meant the world to each other. For admirers, that mystery is still unsolved. Had Lee ever truly pardoned her? Had she ever hoped he would? Perhaps the answer lies in the silence that followed her passing, along with the years that came before it. Lee never made a public attack on her. He had no interest in reclaiming his narrative or benefiting from theirs. Avoiding the prying eyes of the camera, he instead protected what was left undisclosed. For all intents and purposes, Lee Majors' unending love may have been his unforgiven partner.